All right, friends. So happy Tuesday afternoon. Only one more day of school this week. We are talking about human rights. We started talking yesterday just about thinking about what obligations we have to other people. And today we're going to take a look at like some, and we talked a little bit about what are rights, what are human rights. So today I'm kind of asking you, not just like what you know about what the word human rights, but what do you believe are human rights? What do you think all people should have a right to at school, in our country, and in the world? What rights should we have or anyone have? It's a really big question. There are many different legal, moral, cultural, religious, and political codes or rules that guide people's actions based on what you believe and how to live well together on earth. Today, we're going to take a look at just a little bit about that and think about it and hopefully learn some new things. So one prominent legal code that attempts to address human rights we have is this thing called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. And I ought to be quite honest, I don't even know very much about this because even though it exists and people have talked about it and written it down, it's not like it's a kind of law that people actually follow or use. That's kind of a rude way of putting it, but not all countries agree to it. Not everyone agrees to it. So we'll see. Oh, here's a couple of things about the rights of children. Here's a video on it that we're going to watch in a minute, but here's the poster adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations in 1948, the Universal Declaration of Rights. Am I sharing my screen right now? Yes?
No.
No? Oh, that would help a lot. I'm like, here I am reading this poster and you guys aren't even looking at it. Okay, let's try that again. You guys have to be on top of me. At the end of the day, my brain is fried. Here we go. Can you see it now? The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So adopted in 1948, so quite a long time ago, honestly. I was thinking it was just a few years ago because I was born in the 1960s. So it was only about 20 years before I was born. But it's kind of an interesting document based on what's going on in our country right now and in the world. I'm sure you've heard people talking about some rights like right now, I just voted for in the state of Oregon, there's something taking some language out of our state constitution that says that if you are a prisoner, we can keep you kind of like a slave and make you work for free. So this says, we are all born free and equal. Everyone is entitled to these rights. No matter your race, your religion, your nationality, everybody has the right to life, freedom, and safety. You have the right to own property. That has not always been true. For a long time, women in this country could not own property. They could only own it through their husbands. And if their husbands died, their brothers or their families could take their property away. Women had no right to own property, but they do now. Everyone has the right to belong to a religion. And in this country, you have freedom of religion. You can choose your religion. In some countries, that's not true. No one has the right to hold you in slavery. No one has the right to torture you. Although I'm allowed to torture you with homework assignments that you don't like, because that is my right as a teacher. Please don't tell me that I'm torturing you. You have the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. You have freedom of expression, the right to free thought and to voice your opinions to others. That's why, like last week, when people had a difference of opinion, and some people were like, I don't want to argue, I don't want to argue. The beautiful thing about the United States is you're allowed to believe different things. You don't have to believe what I believe. You don't have to believe what your classmates believe. You get to believe what you want. You get to speak out about it, and no one will throw you in jail for that. There are countries where if you say things that they don't like, right now that's happening in Russia quite a bit. If people speak out and say, I'm against the war, they can get thrown in jail, which is pretty horrible.
In China, I think.
What's that, Amadi?
When I think a country that does not let people speak out is China. Specifically the communist.
There are quite a few countries. Your family, where does your family come from? Libya? Is that right?
Yeah.
Libya has had some rulers who have been not very good about letting people speak out in the past.
Gaddafi.
Yeah, yeah. You have a right to seek legal help if your rights are violated. No one has the right to wrongly put you in prison or force you to leave the country, although that's happening in our country right now too. You have the right to a fair and public trial. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty. You have the right to help choose and take part in governing your country. In this country, you have the right to vote. That's not true of all countries. You have the right to Social Security. This means that when I retire, when I stop teaching, all the years that I've been working, I've been paying taxes, and I get to get some of that money back when I'm old to help pay bills when I'm done working. So that's called Social Security. And you guys, once you start working, will be paying taxes too. And then when you get old, you'll get to collect Social Security that will help pay your bills. Workers' rights. Every adult has the right to a job, a fair wage, and to join a trade union. You can travel wherever you want. You have the right to leisure and rest. You have the right to seek asylum in another country if your own country is persecuting you. Right now, we have a big case with people from Venezuela have been coming into our country because Venezuela is a mess right now. And now our President Biden just made a rule that too many people are coming in and we're going to stop letting them in. I don't know what they're going to do. It's a terrible situation. Everyone has the right to an adequate standard of living for themselves and their family. Everyone has the right to education in this country. In other countries, that is not true. Your intellectual property as an artist or scientist should be protected. Everyone has the right to a nationality. All adults have the right to marriage and to raise a family. We are all entitled to social order so we can enjoy these rights. You have the responsibility to respect the rights of others. No one can take away any of your rights. Now that is agreed to by the United Nations, but the United Nations is a group of people who don't have a lot of ways to enforce the rules, so it doesn't always work out. So I thought you guys would find this one interesting. The ACLU is a group in the United States that formed to help with African-American rights, but it now defends the rights of all people throughout the country. Abortion care, trans people's right to live freely, people's right to vote, freedoms are at stake. The ACLU is a group that tries to protect individual freedom, no matter what it is. On this page, they have 6 things that maybe I shouldn't even teach you about your rights at school. Did you know as students, you have some rights? Here we go. Now I'm going to be in trouble. Number 1, you have speech rights. In a landmark Supreme Court case, the ACLU successfully challenged a school district's decision to suspend 3 students for wearing armbands in protest of the Vietnam War. The court declared that the students and teachers do not get rid of their constitutional rights to free speech at the schoolhouse gate. Although interestingly, we have been told by Beaverton that we are not to tell you our political beliefs, that would be unprofessional, because some of you are going to believe one way and some another. And if I tell you what I believe, then some of you are going to feel like I'm not on your side. So I wonder what you think about that. I'm not supposed to wear anything political or tell you which way I would vote on anything. But it says here, if you speak up freely or you want to wear a political shirt or anything, you have the right to do that. So over the years, the ACLU has successfully defended the right of students to wear anti-abortion armbands, a pro-LGBT t-shirt, and shirts critical of political figures. The ACLU has even defended the rights of high school students who wanted to protest the ACLU. So they actually defended students' rights to speak out against themselves. How's that for being really liberal? The second thing that's kind of interesting is a dress code. So it used to be in school that they told students what to wear, but now schools are allowed to have dress codes for like safety, but students have a right to express themselves. Dress codes are all too often used to target and shame girls with rules like, no spaghetti straps or no short skirts. That doesn't really affect boys at all. If they force students to conform to gender stereotypes and punish students who wear political messages, this can be targeting, which means they pick some students to be mean to over others. In some places, there have been fights over Muslim girls wearing their headscarves or other religious symbols, and those have been thrown out. You have a right to wear whatever you believe in wearing. Schools have to make a case that certain kind of dress is disruptive. So they have passed some rules against gang symbols in schools. So used to be, I think that the Crips or the Bloods used to wear like these red headbands. They threw that out because they decided it was a violent group and that wearing those clothes was contributing to violence in the school. But you can't just pass a random rule about what kids have to wear. Do you guys think that's right? You think you should be able to wear what you want? Yeah?
Especially the headscarf for the Muslim.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Immigrant rights. Schools cannot discriminate against students on the basis of race, color, or national origin.
Yes.
Undocumented children in our country, if you come into the country, let's say your parents crossed the border illegally, and whether you come with them and you don't have any papers for this country, you're still allowed an education. Schools can't ask you for your paperwork. It doesn't matter. We educate every child in this country, irregardless of their status. So I think that's a wonderful thing about the United States. Some school districts have tried to require families prove their immigration status. If your family is ever asked to do that, you can tell them that is against the law. They cannot ask for that. They cannot ask you to prove that you're a citizen to go to school in this country. Our public schools are free, and you have that right. Students who don't speak English cannot be turned away, and we must try to educate them. So you have that right. If you feel like you have been treated badly, there's actually a group, the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project, and you can click on that link and go there and tell them that you need some lawyers to help you stand up to the school if you feel they're being unfair. Disability rights. In our schools, any student is allowed to go to school. So back when my parents were young, they didn't allow kids who were blind or deaf or maybe had a physical disability to go to school. So kids with disabilities got together and said, this is unfair. Just because I can't see doesn't mean I'm not smart or can't learn, right? And so they got a law passed in the United States that says that all people can go to school. Any child can be in your classroom. Any child can go to school. And so, and you can't have that be a problem. So we have to have things like elevators and ramps in the school to help people access school. We have to have options for people to do speech to text in case they can't type, all sorts of things like that. It's pretty cool. And as teachers, we try to help with bullying of students who are different and making sure that people are treated safely and fairly and with dignity, right? The next one is LGBT rights. Bullying of LGBT students can be really heavy at schools, especially when you get to middle school. And there's a really, really high rate of mental stress and even suicide attempts among those students because they feel left out. So this is something you can help with as you go into middle school and high school, making sure that you treat people as people, no matter what they believe, right? If you find your school is undermining your rights, you can contact your local ACLU. Here's pregnancy discrimination. So in our schools, even in high school, if a girl is pregnant, she can't be kicked out of school. We actually have schools for moms where their children in Beaverton, we have a school where young moms can bring their children to the childcare, and then they're in high school because it's so important to get a high school education that we don't want something like having a baby stop you from getting an education. And that's through the Women's Rights Project. So those are all rights you have at school, which is pretty interesting. Do any of those surprise you? Any of those rights, or did you know you had all those rights?
I knew a few, but not a lot.
Okay. What I'd like you to think about right now, and you might even grab a pencil and a piece of paper as you watch this little video, is what do you think that everyone should have the right to? Because now we have this very crowded world with a lot of people, and you guys live in a fairly wealthy country, but some people live in countries where there are a lot of people and there's not very many resources. And some of the countries there's war. What do you think? Like if you were just to write a list of what you think every human should have the right to, what would you put on that list? listen to this little history video about when they were trying to come up with what a good list of human rights is. It is, the person on here is a former First Lady. Her name is Eleanor Roosevelt, and she was married to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And she helped pass this law in 1948 about rights. And keep a list of what you think rights should be.
On December 10th, 1948, the United Nations adopted a document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Drafted by an international committee led by former First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt, the declaration reflected the UN's determination to prevent the scourge of war and reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights and in the dignity and worth of the human person.
The Declaration is many things to many people, but what it really is a vision that Eleanor Roosevelt negotiated with the world on what the world should be in terms of how it treats people who live on it, and how people treat one another, and how people and governments interact. And it's done in the shadow of war and in the shadow of the Great Depression. The word horror does not apply to the Holocaust. It's too weak. The world has never seen anything like this. And so the Declaration is really the perfect example of the fundamental choice that people all over the world have to make. Are you going to live in fear? Are you going to wake up every day and say that people are evil? Or are you going to say, we are going to learn how to get past that, and we are going to learn to live for dreams and not for the fears of the past?
On December 21st, 1945, President Harry Truman wrote to the former First Lady, asking her to serve as one of the U.S. representatives to the newly formed United Nations. At the UN, Mrs. Roosevelt was asked to lead the Third Committee, which oversaw humanitarian, education, and cultural questions, including the challenge of finding a solution for the fate of European refugees. Of the 2 million wartime refugees in Europe, 250,000 were survivors of the Holocaust. Between February 13th and 16th, 1946, Mrs. Roosevelt met some of the survivors when she visited a series of camps for displaced persons in Germany. The first camp she visited was Zeilsheim. What she saw there, as well as elsewhere in many of the destroyed towns of Europe, shocked her.
This was right after World War II.
A lot of people really say that when Eleanor went to the displaced persons camp, that really was the turning point. But I disagree with that. I'd say it was a turning point, but it was the experiences that led her to understand that to really make it so important. She had seen what it was like when generations of Americans grew up without hope. She understood how violence exacerbated racial tensions in the United States, and saw racial violence, explode during the Depression, and spoke out against that so much that people tried to kill her. And when she went in the Second World War, to the Pacific in 1943, she saw painfully every day what that was. She understands that human rights just aren't political and civil. It's the right to go to school, the right to eat, the right to have shelter, the right to marry, the right to have an identity. So when she takes all of those experiences together, that's her world vision
In January of 1947, Mrs. Roosevelt was asked by the UN to lead a new commission on human rights. The commission began to work on crafting an international Bill of Rights which hoped to answer one deceptively simple question: what rights should belong to every human being on Earth?
And so she then is in charge of negotiating this 18-member committee. Now, I just want to ask you to think of one thing. I want you to pick 18 people that you don't get along with. And I want you to put them around a table. And you don't agree on money, you don't agree on God, you don't agree on family, you don't agree on whether government should exist or not. You don't agree on anything except one thing: by God, you beat the Germans. And so her goal is to help all of these 18 countries come to some common vision that will say, this is what the world should be in the horrors of what the world is. So you have this big debate, this big clash. When Eleanor was negotiating this agreement, she knew that she had to get it done fast. First of all, she says, she knows that lawyers will debate for 3 years where to put a comma. And so she wants to avoid that massive slowdown that would happen if it had to be a legally binding document. And she's also afraid that Truman is not going to get reelected. She will no longer be at the UN. And so she feels like she has a 3-year window.
In December 1947, Mrs. Roosevelt made a shrewd decision. Instead of creating a legally binding document, the committee would first focus on creating a declaration of universally shared rights.
And during this whole struggle, Eleanor comes to believe that food and shelter are the fundamental human right. Because if you go to bed starving, then you can't dream. And if you can't dream, democracy dies. And so for Eleanor, the Declaration was a call to action. She knew that it initially wasn't going to be legally binding, but she understood if we did it right, if the world did it right, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights would be as important as our Bill of Rights, important as our Constitution, important as the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, as important as the Magna Carta. And so the Declaration is saying we are not ever going to let this happen again. But rather than saying never again and just focusing on the negative, they're saying this is what we must be.
I'm going to stop it because we're kind of running out of time and I want to hear your ideas. What do you think? That Eleanor Roosevelt, she was something else, wasn't she? What do you guys think? What do you think some things that you thought of when you were listening to that? Do you agree? Do you agree that that those are the human rights? Just food and shelter are the most important things?
No, definitely.
No, it's not the only rights.
So what do you think are the most important rights?
Being able to actually being able to go out of the country and stuff. Like
Travel.
in North Korea, you could get executed from trying to leave.
You
the
can't
country.
leave North Korea. That's a really unfair place, isn't it, David? That's amazing.
You
know
have
that.
your own opinion against the emperor, you'll get punished until you
Yeah, and I think
learn
even
not have your opinion.
if you
Go ahead, Amadi. Even if you have a different opinion.
if you left North Korea without being caught, when they find out that they would also target your family
That's
members.
correct. Yeah, that's very correct. In fact, there was a young woman, a rock climber, and she was just competing in another country and she didn't wear her headscarf. And then she went back to Iran, and Iran is grabbed her brother because there was some talk that she wasn't going to go back. But Iran grabbed her brother and said, if you don't come back, we've got your brother. So then she went back to the country. They let her brother go and sort of got her in trouble for taking off her headscarf. They claimed she wasn't in trouble because by then everybody had heard about it. And so the whole world was kind of watching. And it's an interesting thing too, the way the world is watching now. So one thing you may not have understood in there when they were talking about the displaced people during World War II, millions of people were taken away from their homes. They lost their property. They lost everything that they owned and were put in these camps. So then after the war, even though they were free, there was quite a bit of debate over what to do. And that's when they formed Israel to send some of the Jewish people to their own country. Of course, there were people already living in Israel and they're still fighting over that land today. So it's really hard when there's so many people on the earth and so few things to share. But I think it was really neat that they focused on the positive with the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And really, instead of saying, these things are bad and we never want to do these things, they said, what do we have to do good that's going to help people not get into wars? And some people are scared now. I don't know if you've heard your families talking now about the Ukraine war and having it spread and get bigger. Right? Have you guys heard about that? No response? Yes, I see some nodding from Vivi. And so we're kind of, as a world, we're kind of watching the situation and trying to step carefully and say, what can we do to help Ukraine to communicate and to prevent another world war? We don't want one to happen, right? Interesting. Thank you for listening and focusing on learning about the past. It's fascinating stuff. Whenever you read a story like a fantasy or a fiction or see a movie and you think it's a really cool story, I guarantee you that story did not come out of thin air. You know that they get all the ideas for stories come from history because history has everything in it, you guys. Everything you've read about, something like that has happened in the world. And the more you learn about history, the more you can make choices and understand the big world that's out there. It's a pretty interesting place. I hope you've learned a little bit more about your rights. So now if I tell you to stop talking, you can tell me, I have the right to free speech, Ms. Laws.
Yay, beautiful. That's a law I'll always say.
That's a law you'll always say. I have the right to tell a riddle every day, huh? I don't know if that's
Is that why your last name is Miss Laws?
I don't know. Did you want to solve your riddle for us, Liam, before we can start book club? Because book club starts in 1 minute.
Did anyone find it out?
Anybody solve the riddle?
Because no one would knock on their own person's door.
Well, we said that, but he said that was wrong.
Okay, the answer is the stranger said he thought the room was his. So, if so, he would have never had the key to the room, and thus he would have had knocked.
That's what we said. You told us we were wrong.
I'm
the one who said that.
What would you say?
We said we didn't think that he would knock.
I said, okay.
You didn't hear us, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't hear you. My internet got.
Okay, you glitched out. All right, so it is the Reading Warlords today. That's Christian, Javier, Eli, David, and Luis. Everybody else, bye-bye, and I'll see you tomorrow. Go do some research on your Flextra project. Reading Warlords, stay with me.
Bye.
Bye.
Pumpkin says goodbye.
Bye. Bye, Pumpkin. Stay with me, Christian, Javier, Eli, David, and Luis.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, Bree. Eli, wake up. Bye, Amoy. Bye, Bree. Bye, Amoy. I'll kick her out. Sometimes I think she's watching a video game. Okay. All right.
I'm making a punching box.
Turn on your screen. Eli, wake up. Eli! Wake up! Sit up. Sit up. Take some. Okay, let's do some exercises. Come on, stand up. Let's do some.
Oh, I'm tired.
Jacks. Get up and do some jumping jacks. Get your blood pumping. Here we go. Christian, get up and do some jumping jacks. Here we go. Ready? 20, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13,
Doing that.
16, 17,
I'm making the
18,
whole building
19, 20. Good job. And Javier just came in. Yay. All right, reading warlords. I looked
we
at our document. Oh, I need to stop.